What's up, everyone? We've been going through this whole story series where we're taking a look at the entire Bible and through all of its confusion and questions and complexities, seeing how it's a story that's focused on Jesus. And so last week we looked at how Israel was waiting for this Messiah to free them from Roman oppression. And that even though they're waiting for this, that there was a lot of disappointment and a lot of hope that had not been met. And that through a man named Zechariah, who was waiting to have a son, God said that he would not only give him a son that he'd been waiting for, but that through this son, he would announce the good news that God was on his way. That God was on his way to earth, not only to save Israel, but to save the entire world. And so we saw through that story that, man, we can have hope that when we are waiting, that God will provide in unexpected ways. And so we look through that story, and now we're looking at a different story following that looks at a teenage girl and just seeing how this unexpected circumstance comes into her life and how she responds to it. During this 4-month period, I know many of us have developed new hobbies or dove deeper into the current hobbies we have. And one hobby that my wife really enjoys doing, and some that I know you guys enjoy doing, is puzzles. And I know when some people look at this bag of 1,000 pieces, they see something that's relaxing and life-giving, bringing order to something that's chaotic. But I know for myself and for most people, when they look at this bag, they see chaos. They see something that is a waste of time, that no matter how much energy or time or effort you give to this, it just seems like nothing good or beautiful can come out of it, no matter how hard you try, and it's frustrating. And I know that for many of us, life for the past 4 months has just felt like this 1,000 puzzle pieces. It just felt like, no matter how hard we try to put the pieces together to make the best out of the situation that's going on around us, it just feels like nothing is working. It just feels like nothing good or beautiful can come out of what is going on. And when you think about what is going on with the pandemic, we just think about how can any good come out of being separated from your family or your friends or not being able to enjoy the things we normally would in life. How can any good come out of that? Or if you just turn on the news and you just see the political divide between Republicans and Democrats, and people politicizing whether we should wear masks or not, and it just seems like no one can agree and no good can come out of that. Or if you look at what's been going on for years, and it's even more on the news of seeing how there's such a big social and racial divide, and people not being able to agree about whether racism still exists and how race affects the way people treat each other. It seems like what good can come out of this time? What good can come out of this chaos? And for me, I wish I had the answers to these hard questions that all of us are asking, but I know that we can find encouragement as we open up the scriptures for people that dealt with the same or similar events in life and still yet had a hope in God, still knew that something good can come out of this crazy difficulty. As we read the story today in Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 56, we see that there's a young girl named Mary. And unfortunately, in her culture and time, there just wasn't many options or opportunities made for women. And so for her, she is a young, probably teenage girl or in her mid-teens that is engaged to be married to a person named Joseph. And this would provide a lot of financial stability and also would just provide a lot of respect for her family and the community. And so for her, she's probably looking forward to this her entire life and is planning the wedding and is planning and looking forward to this life she's going to have in the future. But unfortunately, something unexpected happens and something interrupts her plan. And as you read the story, you see that God tells Mary that she is going to have a child. And that in the same way that God breathed life into existence, that he would bring life into her womb, and that she would eventually have a child that would be the savior that Israel had been waiting for. So, no pressure, right? And so as she hears this news, it says that she is shocked, she is troubled. And in verse 34, she says, "How will this be? How can this happen?" And for her, it was a shock, and she was afraid, and she didn't know what to do. And for many of us, when we feel like when we are put in situations where we did not ask for, we feel like we don't have a choice. We feel like when life happens to us, we don't know what we could do. And we feel like, why me? Why now? Why are you allowing this to happen, God? And so even though we struggle through this, even though Mary was struggling through those questions, her response later on is not only shock and fear and honesty, but also of acceptance, of humility as well, as where she says, "May this be done as you have said." And this is not just her being naive or clueless. This is not just having blind faith or blind trust, but it's her realizing the difficulties that she may encounter, that she may be a single mom, that people may trash her reputation, that her fiance may break up the engagement. But yet, through that difficulty, she is choosing to see that this will be a blessing. That through her having a child, that this child would be the Messiah, that it would be God and human, that it would be Jesus who would come, and he would not only save Israel, but he would save the entire world and be a blessing and bring goodness and justice to the entire world. And so even though she knew there was a lot of difficulty about to happen, she looked forward to the blessing that would and could happen. And there's another young woman who was Jewish that kind of had the same trust in God. Her name was Anne Frank, and she grew up in the 1940s. And during that time, it was when the Nazis were taking over Europe and were putting Jews in concentration camps. So for 2 years, Anne Frank and her family hid in confinement, and they were not allowed to go outside. And even though this was crazy difficult, even though she had every reason to ask why her or why now, she maintained hope during that time. And she wrote this in her diary in the 1940s. She wrote, "That's the difficulty in these times. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us, only to meet the horrible truth and be shattered. It's really a wonder why I haven't dropped all my ideals, because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them. I simply can't build my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I think that it will all come out right, that this cruelty too will end, and that the peace and tranquility will return again." And I think what Mary and Anne Frank understood was this: that when we choose to trust God, that he will bring blessing through difficulty. And this seems very foolish and kind of like blind faith, but it's seeing what will be and what can be. It's seeing this full picture. For many of us, all we see are the broken pieces in our lives. But what Mary and Anne Frank teach us is that, man, it's not only seeing the difficulty, it's not only seeing the broken pieces that happen, but it's seeing how then these can be turned into something beautiful. I would never do this puzzle piece, but if I did, these 1,000 pieces would make up this beautiful Monet painting. And in the same way, it's seeing that God can bring blessing through difficulty. And that's sometimes hard to see, and that takes a lot of time. But knowing that God will bring blessing through difficulty. And next week, we will get to see how Jesus is the blessing, that he is God in human flesh. He is the goodness that our world is dying and waiting for, and that he actually came as a baby because of Mary choosing to believe that God can bring blessing through difficulty. So this week, what I want you to do is I want you to read Luke 1:26 through 56. Read the story about Mary and how she responds. Then I also want you to read a little bit about the biography of Anne Frank and to just see what are the similarities between Mary and Anne Frank, and then just ask the question and think about how did their faith shape the way they were able to go through difficulty, and how did it shape the way they were able to trust God and believe He could be blessing through difficulty. So look at that. We hope to see you next week. Bye, guys.